Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host. And guys, I've got an amazing guest for you today. Butch has taken time out of his very busy schedule when you own companies and you're running the shop and you got lots going on. I always appreciate the time whenever you take time out of your busy schedule for me. So Butch, guys, is the owner of Kryptek. And as you know, I've partnered up with Kryptek. Every single interaction I've had with the members of the Kryptek crew has been outstanding. It's a veteran-owned company. Butch himself has made many sacrifices overseas and at home, and now started his own business a few years ago. It's been how long now?
Got a lot of different birth dates, but it's 10 years, over 10 years, actually, right at that. But yeah, 10
That's
years.
outstanding. So I just want to introduce you guys to Butch. If you haven't met him before or seen his face around, he is the owner of Kryptek. And so, Butch, outside of that, who are you? Give a little brief introduction of who you are in a nutshell.
Yeah, okay. Well, Butch Whiting, CEO and founder of Kryptek. Me in a nutshell, born, raised on a ranch in southern Idaho. My great-grandparents homesteaded in the late 1800s. Grew up a farm ranch kid. Absolutely enamored and loved hunting. Early on, it was a part of our family culture. Um, on the other side of my family, my grandfather was a first sergeant in the 82nd Airborne in World War II and installed me a burning passion for the military. Fast forward through life, ended up graduating from Gonzaga University on an ROTC scholarship, got my degree in mechanical engineering, went to U.S. Army Flight School, was blessed to be selected to fly Apache attack helicopters, did multiple deployments, overseas, Afghanistan and Iraq, the whole time missing lots and lots of opening days of hunting season and or all hunting seasons, daydreaming about being in the outdoor industry. Had a very, very awesome fellow soldier and partner that we basically had this idea to start Kryptek Outdoor Group. We went and started Kryptek on paper, and it got picked up as a concept, and it became a hobby. And it was a hobby for a number of years. Our first big break was that we had written a business model, and Cabela's got a hold of it, and they absolutely loved this idea of our slogan, "Battlefield to Backcountry," which is the fiber of who we are as a brand. They love that tactical hunting crossover, and so they asked us if we, come to a meeting, and went to Sydney, Nebraska, and then, next thing I knew, we were front and center in Cabela's for 3 years, and we are kind of moving from an idea into really it was hobby phase. They I'm sure they made shit pots of money, and we didn't make hardly any, if any, at all. But that was our first real big break in the outdoor industry. They fell in love with one specific sentence that was in that business model, and that sentence was to spiral features and functions out of special operations apparel into the civilian hunting market. And at that time, things like built-in knee systems, adjustable waist systems, and that type of stuff was not in play. And even with what was the emerging technical brands, and we just saw a real solid application. And so yeah, in a super quick snapshot, that's me on the side, and the rest of me is I'm a loving father, been married 27 years, or actually 28 years now. We have two daughters that are awesome and love the outdoors as well, and I'm extremely blessed. Probably something a lot of people in the hunting space, they probably don't know, but I'm a closet cowboy. My family's very much into Western lifestyle and rodeos and such. So I guess in a snapshot, real quick, that's who I am. If somebody asked me in the elevator, and we're on the 10th floor, and we had to go to the bottom floor.
There you go. Yeah, and that's amazing. I didn't know your grandfather was in the 82nd Airborne. I actually My grandfather retired out of the 82nd. I was born right there out of Fort Bragg. So
Nice.
that's a whole nother breed of individual for sure. People that are willing to go airborne. And then I've recently learned just a little bit about. I knew Apache helicopters were amazing. You were a pilot, so you know the ins and outs and like the back of your hand these helicopters. But for people that don't know about Apache helicopters, it's one of the coolest pieces of machinery that was well ahead of its time. When they were first launched,
Dude, still
and
today. Still
yeah,
today.
oh yeah,
So
and
the most lethal weapons platform on the battlefield. Well, yeah, that's the reason why I fell in love with them. That hunting aspect that I had growing up, and a lot of the skill sets that I kind of garnered through my family, my uncles, my grandfather, all that played out so well in that community being an attack helicopter pilot. I mean, I'm telling you, the best attack helicopter pilots were probably some of the best, outdoorsmen and hunters as
mm-hmm.
well. But it's an extremely lethal weapons platform, and for sure, when I was flying them, they've gotten better, even improved. They're constantly improving. It's like, you know, I flew Lot 8 long. I actually commanded Renegade Troop 43 ACR. We had the brand newest Lot 8 longbows. My guys actually picked them up in Mesa, Arizona from the factory. We flew them to Fort Hood, Texas, and we spent 6 months learning how to fight and fly. Well, flying them wasn't different, but fight the new systems. And then we deployed them and took them to Iraq. I'm not sure what lot number they're on now, but it's echelons even better than it was with me. And I'm going to tell you what, Jonathan, I joke about this, but my wife knows it's true. I often say, I remember 27 years married, right? I often say the only thing I ever loved more than my wife was Apache attack helicopter.
Well, and I don't blame it. From what I understand about it, and I've done a little bit of research just kind of on the surface, figuring out a little bit more because when I was a kid and I had all the different, I guess, helicopters and cars and stuff when I was playing Matchbox, the Apache was my favorite one whenever we would do the Army men, the soldiers, and so I just thought it looked cool. And then recently, I've been figuring out how the helmet itself,
Yeah,
and correct me if I'm wrong here, but where you look is where it will aim
yeah,
the guns. And so that's insane. That's like, I mean, that's before virtual reality VR stuff was real. You guys were using very similar technology years ago. And that's pretty intense, and that's pretty awesome that you were literally a part of the machine.
yeah. You would be. What you do is, first of all, the helmet was an absolutely critical piece of the equipment, and there was 4 IR sensors on that helmet, 2 in the front and 2 on the back on the sides. And in the back of the cockpit, there was 2 IR emitters. They were constantly emitting infrared energy into the cockpit. And so the helmet was like super custom fit to you. I mean, you would spend, hours in a seat with a specialist getting this helmet basically custom to your head. Um, and so when you got this helmet, it was like super dialed in. It was a crazy expensive piece of equipment at the time. And I think they've only gone up in price and become much more sophisticated. But how it worked is you'd plug that helmet into the aircraft. There was a couple different plugs. One was to plug into the computer systems and the IR and all that. And then also you'd plug in for your comms, and you would get everything all set. You set in your seat, gets front and center, and you had a device we'd plug on the side or snap to the side, and we'd rotate it down in front of your eye. And that was a heads up display unit, a HDU. And you'd basically turn on a bore sight, and a crosshair would come up in the middle of that reticle. And there was a tube that was actually right center of the data line on the top of the canopy, or on top of the dashboard, so to speak. And you'd line everything up, and you'd hit a button, and you were bore sighting your retina to the datum line of the aircraft and telling the aircraft, okay, this guy's head is now aligned with the aircraft in this position. And then from there, to your point, once you were flying, doing everything else, you could, what they called WAS, or weapon action system, or whatever, up the gun or whatever, and you could look and shoot off axis. And it was a
Wow.
real super incredible, and is a super incredible feature. Well ahead of its time for sure. That's for sure. I mean, things have come so far so quickly, that's probably really old school. But yeah, I mean, it's an integral part of the aircraft for sure.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And again, just I always looked at them and thought they were just cool. They're sleek. You can tell they're fighting machines, and that's what they're built for. But in Apache helicopters, do you have a co-pilot, or is it a single man?
There's a front seater and a back seater, or a gunner and a pilot. The back seat's actually ergonomically designed to be like on the controls. The front seater's got some other displays and things, that's more for employment of the weapon systems. But you can fly from both seats and you can shoot from both seats. Um, the only thing you couldn't do in the front seat was start the engines, and the only thing you couldn't do in the back seat was laze a target. That was the only
Mhm.
delineation between the two. I spent the majority of my time in the front seat because I was on the radios, command and control, um, you know, basically kind of coordinating with the ground guys, coordinating deconflicting fires, talking to hire, doing all that type of thing. But yeah, it's a tandem dual seat aircraft. And to your point about like just looking cool, um, yeah, it looks pretty damn fierce for sure. And I'll never forget, we finished a mission on the Syrian border one night, and we had hit a bunch of Al Qaeda vehicles. The ground guys came in, um, swooped up some survivors, took them prisoner. Um, we dispatched a Black Hawk out there as we're pulling security. They loaded the POWs up, brought them back to Talifar, and outflew, landed, shut down. And as I was walking back to the hangar, they had all these Al Qaeda guys on their knees with sandbags over their heads, and they were, kind of standing security over them. And I asked one of the guys, I said, "Hey, ask those guys what blew their vehicles up and what just happened." And so he started, asking him and talking, and he comes back and he says, "They said spitting witch, spitting
Oh.
witch." And I'm like, "Spitting witch, huh?" They said, "Yeah, they call you guys spitting witches." So that was kind of interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's an interesting way because I mean it's probably to people that aren't used to that sort of technology, it probably is magical, what you can do with those machines. I mean, the aircraft is just the way you can maneuver them, and what you can do with them is just, it's beyond my understanding. And I know, so my son actually just got his commercial license to be a pilot, but he's like, I don't want anything to do with helicopters because he's like, there's too much
Going on.
he said it's cool, but it's too much to maneuver different axes because you're not just flying in one direction. You have to make sure your body's not spinning along with the rotor and all these other things. So it takes a lot of skill. And then on top of that, the stress of, you know, again, going at such high speeds, you've got certain targets that you're going after. And then the stress of being at war in general. I mean, all of that together is just, that's super intense. So I'm sure you've got a
It's
lot of experiences.
it's never fun no matter what you're doing when you're getting shot at, but it doesn't help
Hmm.
when you got a bunch of other things you got to do. These
Yeah.
the aircraft are pretty advanced with, especially the Apache, with the ability to, there's a lot of stabilization that's provided by computer systems and so on. Other airframes are all manually input, hydraulic input, like a simple, like Little Bird or MD 500. But yeah, flying helicopters is definitely much more complicated than flying fixed wing. That's for sure,
Hmm.
especially when your engine goes out and you're at altitude, right?
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Man, that's crazy. So you're out there. Well, I guess you started on a farm, so obviously that's not easy labor to begin with. That's not an easy laid back lifestyle. I never had that opportunity, but I know plenty of people that have, and I definitely understand that makes a whole nother type of individual as well. But you went out of that, you went into the military, and then of course you're missing all of these days that you grew up hunting. You grew up knowing opening day, knowing the dates, loving hunting Idaho, which Idaho has tons of opportunity. You've got elk, you've got deer, you've got bear, you've got so many different options, and you're just kind of daydreaming about what I guess Kryptek has become and where it's going to go. So kind of walk us through where did that vision start for you and then your buddy, with Kryptek? How did that start?
Well, it started, if I go back into college, I did my senior design project for High Country Archery. And at the time they were like the big dog in the archery world, especially in the whitetail hunting world. And so I had this incredible, like the best year of college was my senior year. I converted the whole basement of the engineering building into this archery lab. There was one other mechanical engineer and 3 civil engineers that were a part of this team. And as part of this project, High Country had made a donation to Gonzaga. I don't know monetarily what it was, but then they gave us like a series of specs they wanted to hit. And they wanted to hit a certain axle, a certain brace height, 6.5 inches. I think it was 30 inches axle, and the bow had to weigh under 5 pounds. And so we were designing new bows. We had complete access to their engineers. We were constantly sending, requests for information back and forth. It looked like when you walked into the basement of this engineering building, you were walking into a bow shop. And one whole end of the building was like just this massive target array. And it was just incredible. At the same time, all that's going on, I was shooting a lot and actually hunting with Dan Evans. And Dan Evans was running the archery shop in Spokane. And, Dan was making fall away rests before there was fall away rests. We take a 3D Platinum Premiere, we take it apart, put it back together, and we're making fall away rests. So, as we progressed along, as I progressed along, around 2000, the year 2000, the archery product of the year, Dan had went and started Trophy Taker Arrow Rest, and I think archery product of the year that year was the Shaky Hunter, and bow of the year was the High Country Carbon Forerunner, and that's the bow that I designed in college. In the meantime,
Awesome.
I'm out in the military doing my thing. So 9/11 hits, I'm downrange. Every time I get a care package, there's a hunting magazine in there. I open it up and here's Dan Evans on a page, right? And I'm like thinking like, oh, I can't believe this, right? I can, as it progresses along, I was always comparing like, man, how cool would it be to be in the outdoor industry? So I had this entire burning passion, like always falling back in the outdoor industry. And the thought was like, if you could do something where you could go hunt, you could go fish, you could go do all these things and still kind of, take care of your family, that would be epic, and so that was a big catalyst. And truth be told, I was looking at all kinds of stuff. Like I was deployed in Iraq one time and I was reaching back to, a hunting concessions here and there that I saw that were, up for sale, trying to broker a deal from Iraq with like some guy that's trying to sell his hunting concession. I wasn't super hell bent on like one specific area. I just knew, about the hunting industry, or it being in the hunting industry in general. And I really thought it was going to be along the lines of archery related stuff, just because of that opportunity that I had in college. And then my business partner, Josh Claycorn, he's one of my warrant officers, and he actually is the one that kind of like, hey, you see what these guys are using in spec ops, these clothes and these knee systems and all this stuff? And I was like, yeah, I do, I see that. And so we kind of got this idea of like, just, what if you took all those features and functions and you brought them over and offered them up in the hunting market, and it got hit. I mean, that's like, there was somebody that was like, yeah, that's an awesome idea. And by the way, we've tried to do that in the past. This is Cabela's talking. We've tried to do that, but we didn't have any real backstory and we don't have any authenticity, so it's never really worked well. And so it kind of accelerated that into what is, the start of Kryptek, right? Because there was a door that opened there and we jumped through it. And when we first came to market, Cabela's wanted the Kryptek apparel in mothwing mountain mimicry. And in hindsight, I can see it really clearly. At the time, it wasn't so clear. But what had happened was Sitka had originally come out in mothwing mountain mimicry. And when Jason Harrison, basically had a bunch of turmoil in Sitka, and Gore-Tex came in and acquired and took over Sitka, and he pivoted stage right to go start Kuyu. Gore-Tex left mothwing mountain mimicry out of the equation, and they went into Gore Optifade. And so from a camo perspective, when Cabela's was talking to us, they said, oh, these guys are authentic. These guys got a great story. We can wrap them around this launch. This whole battlefield to backcountry makes all the sense in the world. We love that. And if we put them in mothwing mountain mimicry, then all the guys that want to finish out their kit or didn't get their kit or whatever, maybe they got a jacket, but they didn't get the pants or the rain gear or whatever, we're going to be in the middle of that. And I see that now. But at the time I didn't know any of this. Right. We were just like, dude, you aren't gonna believe who just called me. That was freaking Cabela's. Well, holy shit, that type of thing. I mean, that's how naive we were. So for years we were in mothwing mountain mimicry with Cabela's. The only place you could buy it was at Cabela's. And while that was happening, we were talking about like, hey, someday we're gonna have our own camo patterns. We want to have our own identification. And so there were some ideas about that. And this tender or a solicitation came out from the Department of Defense, and they were looking for a new family of camouflage. And how this all worked in a nutshell is they said, hey, we want 3 patterns. They need to have the same macro and micro designs, macro print and micro print. We want to cover a woodland area or green jungle or dense rainforest, whatever. We want to cover an arid desert environment, and then we need something for everything in between, which they call transitional. And transitional environments, the Earth in military terms is considered 70% transitional environments, right? So that was like, okay, well, if we've got some ideas, we've got some concepts. If there was ever a time, let's do this. Let's go. And the inspiration for our camo patterns out of the gate was camouflage and netting, because we saw that was the most effective passive concealment measure on the battlefield, primarily through camouflage netting that got stretched over a TOC, a tactical operations center, or a high guide or a Humvee or whatever. And when those hexagons got distorted and that fabric was woven in and out, had this 3-dimensional aspect, and it worked extremely well. So our inspiration was to take camo netting, a 3-dimensional piece, and put it on a 2-dimensional surface. Truth be told, the absolute best passive concealment measure on the battlefield is a ghillie suit, but nobody wants to mess with a bunch of string and yarn and shit getting in your cables and your cams and all that. And it gets wicked heavy when it gets wet, and it's hotter and shit and all that. So we developed our camouflage patterns. We submitted them to the U.S. military. They went from 60 some odd companies down to about 28, like immediately, because they hadn't hit spec. They forgot certain things, whatever, and they didn't get a chance to go back and fix it. And then it went into phase 1 testing. The phase 1 testing took them a year, 900 soldiers. They put them in a room. They did what was called a PIP, a picture inside of a picture. And they'd have a 2-scale silhouette of a man, and these drop-down devices that tracked the soldiers' retinas, and they looked for the camo man in the picture of the field or a picture of the mountainside, and measured in microseconds how long that took, and the longer the better. The bottom line, fast forward through all this stuff, is that we got down selected with 3 other companies that were all billion-dollar companies, and
wow,
we were like our laptops and our cell phones, and we didn't even have an office. And progressed on from there. We got some monetization to go into phase 2. And where this ties back into Cabela's, we went down for a meeting, and I happened to have a swatch of Kryptek Highlander in my backpack. And we met with these guys. We're mostly talking about accessories, gloves, hats, beanies, gators, things like that. And towards the end of the meeting, I just happened to pull out this swatch of Highlander and kind of told them what we had going on, and they lost their mind. And they were like, "Holy shit, can we use that?" And it was this really super crazy decision cycle because we're still in the military phase 2 testing with the Department of Defense, and we had Cabela's asking if they could use it. And the way that tender was written is the brand got to keep the commercial rights to the camo pattern, and the Department of Defense, and specifically the U.S. Army, had 10 years rights to it to use it on their equipment and however they wanted. And so through those discussions with the DoD, they're like, hey, if you want to do this, you can. And we ended up doing it, and then we got a lot of scrutiny right away because the Army hadn't made a selection, and there's a lot of people are like, dude, you guys just shit the bed. You really messed this up, blah, blah, blah. But truth be told, as it went through and progressed through phase 2, which was all force on force, naked eye acquisition testing all over the world, and soldiers involved, high illume testing, infrared, shortwave infrared under NVGs, it got crazy political. And there was some super smart articles that came out that said, from guys that were in the know, they said, hey, whoever wins this, the commercial rights alone is worth $1 billion over the next 10 years. And then it started to click and dawn on me. I'm like, dude, this is like a much, much bigger deal than what we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 3 groups had lobbyist groups in DC. We didn't have anything. The end state with the whole thing was they convinced Congress to pass a bill that said anyone federally funded would all go into the same camouflage pattern. So Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Border Patrol, everyone. And instead of the U.S. Army, who was going to be the recipient of this, announcing the award and releasing the phase 2 test results, they just went quiet. And to this day, the phase 2 test results never have been released. And it didn't go anywhere. In the meantime, out of all the brands that are involved, Kryptek's the only one that has actually opened up a commercial program in the hunting market with Cabela's. And so at the end of the day, our original family of camouflage is the only camouflage that has been extensively tested by the Department of Defense to well over $10 million, and is currently selectively used by both U.S. Navy Special Warfare, Army Special Warfare, U.S. Special Operations, and Coalition Special Operations. And the other brands can't say that. So kind of an interesting segment. That camouflage that you have on your hat, Highlander, is probably one of the most effective camouflage patterns that's ever been developed. And it was extensively tested by the U.S. government.
Oh yeah, no, and I love it. It's I didn't realize it, and it makes sense because I've seen pictures of where obviously people have seen pictures of the netting, but my dad's got pictures from where he was working out. He was over in the Gulf War, and he was in the Marines, and so they would put the netting over there wherever they were at, in their base, and so. I didn't think of it like that. I looked at it and think snake skin, but it makes sense now when you say that. It definitely pieces it together.
Dude, and a lot of people have said that. Like in the knockoffs that are out there that come out of China, they use, a snake skin variant or whatever. I've also heard, butterflies. I've heard different things. But you hit certain restraints when you go to do what's called wet printing, which is how military grade fabrics are printed. When you wet print fabric, you get certain other additional properties that most hunters aren't concerned about. And that's back into the term infrared and shortwave infrared. So is it still camouflage when somebody's trying to acquire you through a set of night vision goggles? Now you can take anything. I could take a picture of your face and we could make RedBeard camo and we could heat transfer it onto any fabric substrate. The problem with that is if you look at that in the infrared and shortwave spectrum, or here's a better analogy from a hunting perspective. You have a trail camera set up It's your bear bait station,
Mm.
right? Let's say you're in Idaho and it's legal to bait bears. So you go in, it's dark, you're going to get in the stand, right? You get up in the stand, you hunt that day. Maybe on the way there, and you flip the card out. So while you're in the stand, you can look at like what's been hitting your bait. Well, when you look at those pictures and it's dark and you're wearing I don't care what hunting brand it is, our gear included, if that apparel was done with heat transfer paper, you're going to look like you're Gumby the glow stick, right?
Hmm.
You're going to look like you are white, a white green color, right? Now, if you take that same scenario, same exact thing, but you go in there and you're wearing military grade Nyko 5050 or whatever it is printed, in that picture, you're going to look grayscale camouflage. You're still
Hmm.
going to see the breakup in the silhouette. And that's what, when you're going against near peer competitors, and what the military is concerned about is that they're not only fighting in the day, naked eye acquisition, they're also fighting against at night. And depending on your enemy's capabilities, you don't want to be Gumby the glow stick. You want to be still broken up.
Hmm.
So that's the difference between how stuff gets printed. There's lots of other ways to do stuff too, but those are the two primary deals. When you go back into the wet printing, you have certain constraints on how you can do things. You can't get as complicated and as fancy as you can just with heat transfer paper, which you could take any picture and put it on any fabric.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's cool. That's some good insight there. But that's a really awesome journey that this whole deal has gone through, and I don't think that a lot of people understand the whole idea behind the camo, because I have heard snakeskin a lot, and so now that I know the story, I can go around and tell everyone where it came from. But it definitely makes sense to me. So I like the Highlander, and then your transitional, was that the Obscura transitional that you guys went with, or is that since then?
So we developed a new family of camouflage, which is the Obscura transitional. And if you look at that, we took the original Kryptek camo,
Mm-hmm.
made that the micro pattern. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's set back in the background. And then we took the idea of a very effective, probably most effective camo pattern in history, modern history, is tiger striping, and we basically
Mm-hmm.
put bold on the macro pattern, some bold quote unquote tiger stripes. It's not just straight lines,
Yeah.
which provides even more breakup at distance. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
the transitional, it's an unfortunate name actually. I mean, it made sense at the time. Obscure transitional was for transitional environments. Little did I know we were going to step into like a woke critical race theory, like trans is like now, like, Bud Light is, the whole transvestite nonsense.
Yeah.
So I prefer people call it, obscure transitional and not
Yeah.
obscure trans.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got them lined up here. So I've got some, and that's probably my favorite pattern, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
for elk hunting. It seemed to work really well, especially this year when it was so wet. There was a lot of green around,
dude.
and so yeah.
If you're in junipers, it's epic. I mean, all the camo patterns work extremely well, but that obscure transitional is my go-to right now for archery elk, and the guys are running it right now for rifle elk too. Um, it's extremely effective, and that actually was inspired by DALO, which is the Danish Army Logistics Office. They'd come to us with a problem set, and we kind of entered into working with them on some things, and Obscura Transitional came out of that. But it's extremely effective, which, when you're bow hunting, especially, concealment can help. you know rifle hunting, I'm sure, yeah, but bow hunting, uh I would say that anything you can do to provide you additional advantage, um it's a must. Um and it's really crazy awesome. What I think is, what's the true test of like an effective camo pattern is, when you get into turkey hunting. Turkeys have
Mm.
some of the best vision. That's what they rely on 100%, versus like smell or noise is included, but man, they're visually acute. And if you can defeat, turkeys, and all the patterns work really, really well for that. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a good test though. If you're sitting there calling a turkey and it comes up and starts pecking your leg, that it's probably working pretty good. But yeah, the camo patterns are all-purpose driven. A lot of the better, well-known names in the outdoor industry that have established, empires have been more focused on shelf appeal than they have on effectiveness. And, when you get into photorealistic camouflage patterns that look really good on the shelf, when you start to get out to distance, let's just say that distance is for a bow hunter, 20 yards would be close, but definitely like 50 yards, it becomes a blob. And then that's not effective at all if you're in a combat environment.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you don't see like a whole lot of mercenaries or ragtags running around on the news in the Ukraine wearing, Realtree or Mossy Oak. And so, there's a balance between shelf appeal and between effectiveness and purpose driven. And the shelf appeal deal, we found ourselves in a space we never imagined when we started by taking just different colorways and plugging them into the macro and micro pattern. And all of a sudden you've got a whole new demographic that we never even really imagined. You get into this lifestyle aspect, and we've had some major groundswell in things like in fishing, which, all this is like a psychology type application, but you're able to also tell those people that you're interacting with on a daily basis, you're an outdoorsman if you're wearing one of those pieces. So when you have a bright blue and a black, I mean, you're not really trying to hide from the fish in those cases. I think when fly fishing does have some real cases where you're trying to, not let the fish, see you, but saltwater and stuff is where we've seen the majority of the success. And it becomes, for a lack of better terms, a fashion piece. And so camouflage is incredibly, it's an interesting discussion. It's a paint job, right? But you've got true purpose-driven functional camouflage. And in recent years, you see it everywhere in terms of the fashion world on all kinds of stuff and brands that, that it's not purpose-driven at all. I do believe that for sure when it comes to esprit de corps, morale, identify friend or foe, that's an important aspect of how the camo looks, recruitment for a military organization, people, you want your organization to feel proud that soldiers or the seamen or whomever feel proud when they, don that uniform. The hunting world's, years ago, there was the camo wars. The camo wars were between Kryptek, Kuiu, and Sitka. There's a pivot right now where solids are super popular and maybe mixing of that. I've killed, and I know a lot of awesome animals for decades and decades have been shot in flannel shirts and blue jeans, right? But what it comes down to is that it's a paint job. And what really matters is what's under the paint job, right? Does it keep you dry? Does it keep you warm? Does it keep you cool when it's super hot? How does the piece perform? Is the piece itself, the silhouette itself, purposely designed? Is it meeting your hunting expectations or your adventure expectations? Is it durable? Is it holding up? There's all those different aspects. And truth be told, there's a lot of really, really great brands that make exceptional product, especially in the expeditionary mountain type hunting area, that the products themselves are exceptional. Ski, mountaineering, right? But the brands themselves despise and hate guys like you and I. They despise and hate what we hold true to heart, like that we stand for. And they hate firearms. They hate, quite frankly, probably hate the United States of America. So that's important too. I mean, if you get behind some of the absolute most premier brands in the expeditionary mountaineering world, you're no longer supporting the way of life that you want to have for your children and generations to come. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another aspect of this. And I would say even within the hunting industry proper, there's woke brands, which is crazy to me. It absolutely blows my mind.
Well, there's money to be made, and that's kind of, and it is sad to see that, and that's why, I personally like to align with companies that I know have really good standards, and it was really sad because can't remember when it was, but REI came out basically anti-hunter, and I was like, well, shoot, because like they sell a lot of amazing gear that could be used for hunting, and
Tell
can't.
you exactly when it was. It was when Vista Group acquired Savage, and they
Mm,
were carrying a bunch of brands inside of REI that were owned by Vista Group. Camelback is one. I think Bell Helmets is another one. There might be more, but basically, at that time, REI decided, well, since you bought a firearm company, we're going to boycott all your entire family of brands, and you don't
mm,
want placement in our stores. But yeah, of course, there's great brands in there. Of course, there's great sleeping pads and great sleeping bags and all kinds of like nice little tools to cook with, and all the expeditionary backpack type stuff. But that's what we're up against. And the thing is, hunting's always been up against um, anti-hunters. It
hmm
hasn't been until like the last few years that everything else has really come under attack as well, you know? Um, and it's been just a quagmire that's brought that out under these new administrations and initiatives. But you know, it's it's what you're up against now. And what
Yep.
Kryptek stands for is a lot of we're pro Constitution, pro Second Amendment, we're pro national anthem, we're pro veteran. Obviously, we're a bunch of veterans, which supposedly now gets you on the domestic terrorist list right away. Apparently, and we love to hunt, and we love our families, and we love God, and we want to protect that for our grandchildren's grandchildren, right? So the point though is that when you get behind a brand, and you got to know what else the brand stands for,
hmm Exactly.
because it might not
Ex-
stand for how you want things to go down the road.
exactly. Yeah. And I love all of those values they ring true to me. And again, it's something that a lot of people, you know, I don't think they realize it might take a little bit more work to go, or you might have to spend a little bit more, just a little bit, to not go on, REI, which may be next door, or maybe you've got a discount at REI or whatever. But finding companies that you can align with and spending your dollars there to support them so they can do their business and use their platform to continue to promote the things that you believe in. That's super important. And again, that's why, there's specific brands that I line up with that I I'm also able to provide a discount for my listeners because I'm like, I want you to go to these companies. I believe in them because I've used the gear and I've met the people and I know their values. And now, this is what I've partnered up with. So I do want to ask you, what does Kryptek mean for people that don't know what it means? You've got the Spartan helmet. I get a lot of comments on that being a cool symbol. What does it mean? A lot of guys obviously relate to the Spartan ideology of being a man, and standing up for what you believe in. But what does Kryptek mean? That word per se, or why did you come up with that as your name?
Well, when we first got going, we had a bunch of names, and every time we spent a bunch of money, our own money, private money, pocket money. Our wives thought we were batshit crazy trying to make sure you could acquire them,
hmm
specifically in class 25, which is apparel. Um, and what we did was we took two Greek words, kryptos and technos, and we basically put them together and did a play on the English word cryptic with a C. And kryptos means hidden, technos means technology, So the words together mean Kryptek is hidden technology. It was a play on some spelling, here and there using K. We also, in a lot of our stuff, will use what we call a stylistic Y for the Y. And if you look at that closely, what that is that's the inside of the helmet, right?
Mm.
Happens to look like a Y. And to tie into the rest of the picture on where that came from. So when I was commanding Renegade Troop 43 ACR, I read a book called Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield, which is a historical fiction on Thermopylae. And it really, really just speaks to the warrior ethos of the soldiers and the family and the Greeks that were involved in Thermopylae. And as we were getting ready to deploy, I ordered enough books for each one of my soldiers, all my pilots, all my crew chiefs, maintainers, and everyone. And I went through and wrote a personal note in that book to each one of them, and I handed it to them before we deployed. And the essence of it was warrior ethos. Warrior ethos was what that culture revolved around. Like, it was about nothing more than from the time that they were able to walk, that they were raised and trained to be the most fierce warriors to protect their nation. And that's all super factual, right? When the Hollywood movie 300 came out, I was super excited to go see it. And when I left, I was so mad I couldn't see straight because it was such an abortion. It was terrible. I hated it. I hated everything about the stupid movie. In fact, I've never watched it again, even though you see memes on everything about it.
Oh yeah.
But the logo when this started was kind of an easy one to gravitate to back to, is like that Spartan helmet, warrior ethos. And truth be told, we proceeded like Spartan race, and like that's become a common variant theme. Even the Golden Knights in Vegas, the hockey team. In fact, I've got a thing with them going back and forth where our trademarks precede theirs in certain areas. But why is that? Is because that warrior ethos resonates, with that symbol. And then the stylistic Y is really, in many cases baked into the Kryptek name is like the inner spirit of that, it's warrior ethos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that's been, developed in and around Kryptek, from the name to the logo to the stylistic Y to the slogan, battlefield to backcountry, it's all just really super true, authentic, true fiber of brand, fiber of individual stuff. So hopefully when you get asked that now, you'll have a little bit more of an explanation. And I highly recommend that if you haven't read Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield, you should check it out.
Awesome. I definitely haven't read that book. And I did know what Kryptek meant, but I wanted to hear your explanation because it sounds better coming from you than it does me. So
Well, you know what? I mean, we've got a whole new generation of guys too. Like there was a customer service email that came through here like a week or two ago, and this guy wrote in and he said, "Really, you want us to believe that the government really tested your camo? Come on now." And I'm looking at the deal, and I'm like, yeah, this guy was, he's just coming into his own. He's just, entering the workforce, and you can't ever take anything for granted. I mean, a lot of our customer base right now are wearing flat brims, and I can remember the first time Justin Sparks came into my office, and he had a flat brim hat, and he said, he goes, "Hey, the local West Ada, which is Boise, Idaho here, all-star baseball team wants to do these flat brim hats." And I was like, "Fuck, no, we are not doing that. We are not." And he's like, "But they really want them." I'm like, "Fine, if the Little League baseball team wants those, they can have them." I shit you not, dude. We started to get all these requests. "Hey, we want this hat. We want this hat. We want this hat." And I was like, "Are you shitting me?" And so I had to come up with this mentality shift. And the mentality shift was this, is that even though I probably will not wear that hat, that flat brim hat, would I be embarrassed if I saw one of those little league kids at the time around town wearing it? And the answer would be no. Actually, I'd be proud. Like, hey, that's cool. They want to represent Kryptek, and if they like that flat brim hat, that's great. And so, you know, that flat brim stuff, we got a lot of guys running flat brimmers now, and so that's the mentality you got to take. And they don't all know, you know, the story, and they don't believe the stories too when you tell them. They don't. They're like, whatever, you guys are full of shit. You never, like, why would the Army test your hunting gear? I'm like, I went, brother. You know,
Oh
so
man.
I don't mind telling the story. I think that actually we want to get it into a format and place where people actually can resonate with it and understand it. And most importantly for me now is that they can resonate where we stand, from on which side of the fabric we are on the nation, right? And what we stand for there.
100%.
That's the most important aspect of it, of the
Yeah.
brand. So
Exactly. And that's why I try, and I don't necessarily go out. And so I served a mission down in Mexico and went and there for 2 years. And I don't necessarily preach, you know, on my podcast, but I do always start off talking about faith, family, and then fitness and the outdoors. All of those four things are pillars in my life because it's key to the fabric of this country. And I think everything starts at home. You're a family man. You've got kids. You've got a wife. You've been married for almost as long as I've been alive. And you know, the fact that you're able, that's not the norm nowadays. The norm is, well, marriage is just a piece of paper. You know, it's just a whatever, you can throw it away. And I think the divorce rate's like above 50% at this point. And
yeah,
the family's being destroyed. And so all of those things are definitely key. And I love talking about that. And it's funny to me that you say that, you know, all these kids, or you had this customer service email saying they wouldn't do that. Well, I had a story recently where I was listening to a podcast, the Sean Ryan show. I don't know if you've heard of
yeah.
Sean Ryan. And he had a guy on there that was Delta, and he mentioned the name of one of my scoutmasters
Huh.
growing up. And I was like, and that's not a very common name, those two names together. And I was listening to it, and I texted my scoutmaster. I was like, well, my former scoutmaster was like, hey, do you know this guy? And were you stationed here with him? He was like, yeah. I was like, hmm. And I texted my dad. I was like, Dad, how many of my scout leaders were Delta? He was like, everyone you went out to the woods were trained killers. And I was like, all right. It's, I don't think people realize that the people that, like yourself, that are trained to go out, and you've got these, you know, you've had possible government contracts and things like that, they think of it as fictional. They you know, the kids, I say kids my age, you know, in 30s or younger, don't understand how someone like you, or a Delta operator, or a, you know, an Apache pilot can come into civilian society and not always be wearing camo and touting your military career. You fit in, and you're a businessman, and then you incorporate your values into your business. And so it's definitely something that people need to, I can't believe someone sent that email, but at the same time, I can believe that they would be like, oh, I don't believe this. You know, they get lied
Well,
to on social media so often too.
that's, yeah, probably they never know what to believe. I mean, for me, it just highlighted, hey, we need to do a better job telling the stories that we think maybe others should know, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and at the end of the day, Kryptek is always going to lean on our foundation and where we come from, you know? So we're super honored and proud to serve our nation. And those guys that went and done the Lord's work, you know, I mean, we don't tailor just to that community. We want the
Mm-hmm.
guys that have never served before. We want the guys that like aspire to go do that. We just want the guys that want the best. And we're all in this same boat, right? We all love hunting. We have a passion for it. I don't care if you're a traditional archery hunter or a compound bow hunter, or you shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor that makes you gay. You know, I mean, all that nonsense, right? I mean, it really is about protecting the aspect of why we hunt, the ability of to fill our freezer, self-reliance, and pass that time, on to our kids as well. I mean, at the end of the day, that for me was probably the most important aspect growing up. I didn't go to vacations. We went to hunting camp, and I look back, I wouldn't trade that for anything. And so to protect that culture and that lifestyle really needs to be the end state for everyone. The infighting of, this or that should all go away, because all of us as an entire conglomeration, that what we treasure is under attack in one form or fashion.
Yep.
And so ultimately that Kryptek wants that preserved for generations to come. The outdoor way of life, self-reliance, the ability that you're not shitting down both legs because, COVID comes out and now you wish you remember how, grandma canned and how grandpa had a garden. And, I also remember how they used to go shoot an elk or a deer and fill the freezer, and this lost art for many people. That's the swell in the hunting community. The swell is all these folks going back like, hey, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to go provide for myself and take care of myself, right? If I need to, or even if I don't need to, but I just feel better about it because I know where that came from. I know where that meat came from. It's so easy to get into an argument with somebody that's a vegan and why they're a vegan, and like all the things that they hate about how, hormones and food processing and so on. And you're like, yeah, that's why we hunt. That's why we do it. Cause we're the only ones that touch it. And guess what? There's not a magic steak fairy that just like, voila, throws a steak in the freezer or in the cold section at the supermarket. So these are all things that America was founded on, right? And I think that are important for us to. Of course, we all love to shoot a big buck. Of course, we love the adrenaline. We love the chase. But there's nothing better when you get to share that with your kids and pass that on, right? And so that's Kryptek.
Yep. Oh, I love that. And yeah, you're talking about passing it on. I usually get most of my meat processed elsewhere because I just don't have the machinery to do it. But I keep the back straps, tenderloin, the heart, and we do that at home. And my son, that's always his favorite thing. He's 8 years old, and he always asks me, even if it's someone else's kill, when I come back, I always bring the heart back because most people, they leave it with the gut pile. And my son, that's his favorite thing to do. We find different ways to cook up the heart and to process it. And he's always intrigued as we're cleaning it. Oh, what's this part of the heart? And man, that's so big. Or, cleaning the back straps and tenderloins. And I almost didn't get to eat any of the tenderloin on this elk this last month because my son and daughter were eating it all. And I look over and I have this little chunk left about this big. I was like, well, hold on. I want a piece of that too.
That's the fun part too. I've played both. We used to process always everything, and the kids loved it. And especially if they're involved in the harvest, because then they go through the harvest, the processing, and then the fun aspect then was like my wife would send them out to the freezer to get whatever, wrap, and then they were into the cooking part of it. But when I was growing up, if we didn't bring the heart and liver back, we had to go back and get it. And grandma and mom and everybody was like, where's the heart and liver? That's the first thing they would say. And normally what we would do is make sure that got taken care of first, so we never had a problem. But that's a lost art in itself, eating heart and liver. And there's nothing I love better. I wish that my grandmother was still alive. She had the most epic pickled heart recipe that I can still taste today. I've tried to duplicate it. I can't hit it. I've tried, but that's fun. That's a fun aspect with the kids too, for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. And, teaching them how to clean the meat and what the silver skin is and all of that stuff, just the little details and all the questions that come out of it and the pictures and videos and just the memories that are formed. It's all a lot of fun and enjoyable for sure. But I love that Kryptek stands for that. And again, anytime I've had interactions with people at the company, at headquarters, and just outside of headquarters, it's been a family environment, and it's outstanding. It's with some of the guys, it's like hanging out with your brothers, and then with other people, you can tell that they love their families. They bring their families to the events. They're not afraid to show off that they're married, that they have kids, things like that. It's very family oriented. So I absolutely love that. I want to shift here just kind of to end it a little bit. I want to talk to you about the different items that I've used, and maybe your favorite pieces. I used the Sonora hoodie, was probably my favorite piece during the elk. I'd wear a base layer of merino, and then I'd have the Sonora hoodie. And one, I'm a ginger, so I get burned really easily. And that Sonora hoodie is a 50 UPF shirt, which was outstanding, and super lightweight. So even when I was sweating, it would wick away really fast. And I didn't get cold or hot when I was wearing it, even in the middle of the day. Total Archery Challenge as well. I'd wear that Sonora hoodie every single day. People were like, "Why are you wearing a long sleeve and a hood?" And I'm like, because one, I don't want to put greasy sunscreen on, and two, it's super comfortable. So where did that come from, the Sonora hoodie?
Hot weather type environments. It's almost we've got a lighter version that's all like a bamboo, but that one is light enough to wear. The Sonora hoodie is light enough to wear when it's hot and you don't overheat, but it's also a really nice layering piece. So my favorite ensemble and what I hunted all this year and actually in years past is I love the Sonora hoodie, especially in September, with a Dalibor vest in the morning. And then as it warms up, I can pull that Dalibor vest off, put it in my pack. And then depending on the day too, I really like the Alios pants with this setup because of the knee systems that can go in it. And I enjoy having a knee pad when I'm like, especially bow hunting. But the Sonora, and there's a whole bunch of other hot weather pieces that are actually going to be kind of redone. Mojave pants is another big one as well, that the guys, to your point, that you've gotten to interact with, they absolutely love that as an early season.
Yep,
Even
that's my favorite pant.
Yeah, the Sonora, even when you're in a super warm environment, let's say you're hunting in Sonora, it's still cold in the morning, dude, and it gets cold quick when the sun goes down. And even though you look at it in the day, and even in the winter down there when it's like a hot day is like 85 degrees, it feels like it's way hotter than that. The Sonora is super comfortable. It is one of the best and most favorite early season pieces, but it's also just a great mid layering piece. So that's where you get the compliment of that shirt. It is an outstanding piece for sure. Highly recommended.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then late season, the merino layer, the base layer, is a little bit thick for me for early season.
Yeah.
But around this time of year, October, November, that's definitely my go-to base layer. I like the body mapping that you've done on it. That's a really cool piece. And then, big question that I keep getting asked: why buttons over zippers?
Because we're going to zippers.
Okay.
We're going to retain the top button and have a zipper.
Okay.
So yeah, the feedback and input and stuff like that's super valuable. And if guys have like, hey, I like this, I love this, but what about this? Or if they've got an idea or if they've got a complaint, we want to hear about it so that we can continue to improve and make adjustments. So there's not a real good explanation on the buttons, except I know we're going to zippers. I just had a meeting on it, I think 2 days ago. So here in next year or shortly thereafter, you'll see that Sonora hoodie with some modifications that come down the pipeline.
Awesome.
And back into the merino wool base layers, we've ebbed and flowed, and we've had various weights over the years. We've also had camo printed merino wool base layers. Life cycles morph and change. We're going to get super precise. For me, I think with base layers and even mid layers, it's always going to be a matter of just making constant tweaks, constant improvements. There's going to be new fabrics that come down the pipeline. There's going to be new blends, and you have to be you might have a great piece 1 year, and in 2 years later there's something better. So it's always an evolving thing until somebody comes out with a product better than merino. next to skin, the odor control on that alone is worth it, especially when you hit a blend that's comfortable against your skin, like ours is, which is really the important thing. So, and fast drying. So,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, that merino for a lot of people, it's really athletically built and tight. It doesn't sag if you wear it for a couple of days. It's got the weave in it that allows it to not sag for after a couple of days of use. So I really like that as well.
There's a mechanical stretch built into that with nylon merino blend for that purpose. Exactly.
No, for sure. Well, I appreciate you going over pretty much everything. This history of Kryptek has been awesome. We're going to have to get you back on next year as well. And I'm sure this isn't the last time I'm going to see you for a little bit. But do you have anything else that you want to leave with the audience or anything that we didn't bring up?
For the audience, hey, guys, if you haven't tried Kryptek, hopefully you'll be more familiar with it coming out of this. God bless America, and thanks for your time. And if you do have comments, if you've been running our gear, please send us input. We'd love to hear it and answer your questions directly. cs@kryptek.com. Come visit us. Come visit our site. And thanks for your support if you are running our gear.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Butch. I know you've got lots of stuff going on, so I'm going to let you get back to your busy day and running a company and family and everything else you got going on. But thanks for your time. And guys out there listening, I'll leave the link down below where you can go check out all the Kryptek gear. And then I've done a breakdown on my early season. And by the time this comes out, I'll have my middle to later season breakdown of gear that I'll use as well. Go check it out, the different patterns, whatever works for you from East Coast to West. And they've got it all, guys. And it's the best gear out there. So thanks again, Butch. You guys have an amazing day. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.